Hello, Mustang football fans, and welcome to this week's edition of the Cory Sauter Show. I'm Kelly Loft, Athletic Communications Director, and we thank for watching here at Studio One, Marshall Cable Access, and online at SMSUmustangs.com. We're going to talk Mustang football again this week. The Mustangs coming off a tough loss at number 3 ranked Minnesota State Mankato in Mankato. The Mustangs look to get back on track this weekend, taking on Upper Iowa for homecoming 2014. And we'll talk about that game and much more here later on in the show. But joining us, as always, is the head coach, Cory Sauter. We do want to say, I apologize. Last week's show, we had some technical difficulties, so couldn't be on the air with that show, but we're back this week. And, Coach, we knew the Mavericks were going to be a very difficult team to take on, and they win 56-14 over the Mustangs and taking advantage of our mistakes in that second quarter to open up a game that was kind of going right what you wanted. Time of possession, had a scoreless game into the second quarter, and then disaster hit, and we just couldn't fight back after that.
Yeah, no, let's be honest, Mankato was a very, very talented football team, and they haven't lost a conference game for several years now, and they were very, very good. As you play them in person, it was very evident that they were the better team, and really our game plan was to try to minimize and try to shorten that game as much as we could, and we were able to do that to a certain extent in the first quarter. Burn the time down all the way down inside 5 seconds, almost on every single snap offensively. We were able to get some stops defensively, but then the play happened where they ended up getting a fumble. It was called a live play, and the guy picked it up and ran it for a touchdown, and that was essentially a turning moment for that game. You hate to pin it on one play, but it definitely took some wind out of the sail, so to speak, and after that, it definitely was a very, very rough second quarter, so we've got plenty of things we got to work on, and that's just part of college football.
Yeah, that first quarter, just to kind of recap, the Mustang defense forces the Mavericks to get a couple of punts. Southwest gets pinned inside their 5-yard line with the wind to their back, but you pick up a couple of big first downs, get it toward midfield, and as we talked about, a fumble was caused by the Mavericks, and the defensive player picked it up, ran 47 yards for a touchdown, and may or may not have been on the ground when he picked it up and should have been down, but regardless, they get the 7-0 lead, and then they score to go up 14-0, and then just after that, going into a tough wind, tough to move the football against a team that ranks in the top 10 nationally in defense, and then special teams, the punts just weren't there for the Mustangs. We get a couple blocked. They had a punt return, and those are the type of things that they don't count as turnovers in the stat book, but they're just even probably worse than turnovers because they're just game-changing momentum plays for the home team.
Yeah, no, anytime you have trouble on your punt team, it usually doesn't result very good for your team. We had the two that were blocked, and then you try to bring everybody in to protect, and then all of a sudden they get a return on us, and it definitely turned into a snowball effect from that standpoint, and before you know it, it's 35-0, and when you have that situation, everyone's looking for some answers, and guys are starting to look around wondering what do we need to do to get this thing corrected, and trust me, it's going to be our top priority for this upcoming week to get that corrected schematically, as well as getting certain players on that unit, getting certain players off the unit, that's one of the fastest ways you can lose a game, or just change the momentum of a ball game, and so that was disappointing because really, other than that, at that point in time, and we were playing respectively. I mean, we were able to do some things offensively. We were actually getting some stops defensively, and but anytime you do that is a turnover. It creates short fields, it creates momentum, and that definitely puts you in a tough spot. And it was almost to a point where do we start going for it on fourth down because we couldn't even get the darn ball punted. But then you're looking who you're facing. Mankato's defense definitely is not a team that you want to be trying to go for on fourth down either. So it was a very difficult stretch of time. Really, that second quarter is about as tough as it's going to get.
Yeah, and of course I don't want to keep harping on it, but that just shows, we hear coaches always talk about it, but it is the truth. It is a 3 different teams each game. You got to play well on offense, defense, and special teams, and that's a great example. We've seen that through all 5 weeks this year. Positive for the Mustangs. We've had a punt return for a touchdown. We blocked a couple of kicks as well. So it goes both ways. And as you mentioned, I mean, it's a tide-turning type of event, and it happened against Minnesota Crookston with a block PAT or a block punt, and it just can change so much on both sides of the football.
It really is, and it's each time you run a special teams play, it's like running 8 to 10 normal plays, so they just get magnified each time you go out there. And anytime you deal with field position, that's a big deal. And that third of the game for the most part this season has done a pretty decent job. We've been able to win the special teams third for almost every single game. This game we weren't able to accomplish that, and so it definitely was magnified, and it's on film now, and we've got to make sure that we have an answer, because if we don't have an answer, we'll continually get the same type of looks.
Well, a couple of things positive to look at from the ball game. Minnesota State has shut out its first 2 opponents at home. They've only given up about 9 points a game through their first 4, but you were able to establish a run early in the game, and obviously things change when it's 35-0, but you rushed for almost 140 yards, and you got over 300 yards of offense. I mean, there were some positives to take away, because you had to play a lot of different guys on both sides of the football, but we saw a lot of different guys in different spots on the offensive line, and Blake Gimbo got to play some air in the second half, and good experience. So there are some things to take out of, especially in that first unit against the Minnesota State's top unit as well.
Yeah, no, our backups actually played a good majority of that ball game. When it's 35-0 at halftime, and you don't have a whole lot of answers, it's time to invest. It's time to get some guys some work, guys that need to get some reps, and we wanted to get those younger guys in there and just get a taste for what it's like. And so, like a guy like Blake Gimble played really almost all the second half, got just as many pass attempts as Charlie Kern, and actually made some big plays. And so that was just good to see certain guys just get in there and play. Guy like Austin Hilgert, the true freshman, he played really, really well. He was actually our second highest graded offensive lineman this week, and there's a reason why we pulled his red shirt. We think he has a great future ahead of him, and the nice thing is he did it against some really good competition. So there was some positives to pull from it. I thought overall, defensively, we were able to make some things happen there as well. But again, when you're playing Mankato, they've got just so many good players across the board and good backup players, and it makes it very difficult. And your typical big runs turn into a 5-yard gain, and some of your normal 5-yard gains turn into a 1-yard gain, and they're good. I mean, there's just no way around that, and we knew that going in, that we'd have to play pretty much a perfect game, and we were far from that.
Well, the Mavericks just 6 of 14 on third down conversions. The defense got some big stops, and you look at a pick 6 by Darryl Thomas there in the fourth quarter for the Mustangs. And even early on, A.J. Page, who missed the last 2 games because of injury, he made a big impact, had a big sack, and just shows you that how important he is, to pick up a big play. I mean, a sack is a huge play, and that made the Mavericks punt. But we're seeing some guys, again, getting some snaps and making some plays, and Thomas is a perfect example there, named the team defensive player of the week. He gets a pick 6, and or the special teams as well. He was named player of the week, but made a big play on defense.
Yeah, no, we had a good conversation on Sunday in our team meeting just about the game of football, and it's about players. It really is. It's about players. I look back at last year. Are we doing anything that much different than we did last year? Not really, but certain guys were able to step up and make plays when the opportunity presented itself. And so I really wanted to challenge our guys, knowing that, we're not always going to have the perfect call. We're not always going to have everything exactly designed how it should be, but there's a point in time where guys have to step up and make plays, and you got to be accountable for that. And that's the same way I was when I was playing. The fact that if we didn't play well, you take ownership in that, and it's your own fault, okay? If you don't win, it's your own fault as a player. And so we've got to get that mentality with our guys that we're not always going to have everything perfect for them, as far as a play call, right? That's when they have to step up and do some things as well. So it's going to be a fun week for us because we're going to get after it, and I'm excited about how we're going to respond, and that's the biggest thing that I want to see from our players starting on Tuesday.
Well, that's one thing. You said this after each week, when had a tough loss in week 1, bounced back and got the win, and how many games left. I mean, you just look at the schedule, some of the numbers, the facts. I mean, we're not even halfway through the season yet, and still a lot of games to play in the South Division. You just look at last week. You have, Wayne State. Most people probably didn't think they would beat Winona like they did, and you see Upper Iowa coming to town undefeated with an incredible start. But what a challenge! What a great opportunity for our guys to come home, play homecoming. Going to be a great crowd and a chance to beat an undefeated team. Yeah,
you couldn't ask for a better setting. You look at it. No one's going to give us a chance, playing a team that's undefeated. We've got a home game. It's homecoming. I tell you what, I mean, I feel good. I really do. I feel good that our players are going to respond. We're going to challenge them. We're going to push them. We're going to have a great plan. And, I want to see us get out of this, right? I really do. I want to see it for the sake of a lot of people, our seniors and everybody else who has put a lot of time into this thing. At halftime will be the halfway point of the season. So I want to see something. I want to see somebody respond, and it has to matter. And so time will tell. But I definitely am excited about this week and this challenge that lies ahead.
Well, let's take a look back at the loss to Minnesota State. The Mustangs losing again 56-14 to the Minnesota State University Mavericks. Let's take a look at the highlights. Our first one here, we mentioned the sack by A.J. Page. Good to have him back in the lineup.
Yes, it was definitely great to get him some snaps, and he's on the left side of the screen here. They got a play-action pass. He bites through, gets through and makes a nice play on the edge.
After a couple of punts by the Mavericks, the Mustangs pinned deep inside their 5-yard line. Big run here for Ashanti Payne.
Yeah, almost breaks this one. Nothing like starting on your own 3-yard line, though.
And then the Mustangs on a big 3rd down. Great call here, a screen pass to Tondrum.
Yep, we're finally able to get a screen that developed, have enough time to get it out, and you can see everyone's doing their job, getting blocks downfield, offensive linemen, receivers. It's nice getting Tyler out on the perimeter.
Now we go back to the defensive side, a tackle for loss by Jake Lefso, Alex Burton, Blake Pennick all in there.
Yep, and actually we did a pretty decent job of bottling up the running backs. They're going to hit a few big plays, but we kept them to a minimum.
And highlight here in the first half, Charlie Kern to Adam Olson.
Yep, we ended up getting into scramble mode, and ends up finding Olson adjusting his route near the sideline, and comes down with this with a nice grab along the sideline.
But as you mentioned, a tough second quarter there for the Mustangs. The Mavericks score 35 straight points to take a 35-0 lead into the halftime break. And as you mentioned, it's about individuals and making plays and having some pride. And I'm sure that's what you had to talk about, as you mentioned, at halftime, coming back out, because there's still 30 minutes to play. And the last thing you want to do, I mean, it's out there on film. Watching, you don't want to embarrass yourself, and you want to see who can step up and make some plays.
Absolutely. I mean, it was probably not the time to just start getting in there and start screaming and start yelling at guys, because that wasn't going to correct anything. Really, at that point, we had to regroup. We had to just make sure that we came out with some intensity and some pride and just finishing a ball game. Because I said, you know what? If you let them, it's going to be 70, 80 to nothing. If you let it happen. And so, I wanted to make sure that the guys that were in the game had some sense of urgency to them, and we were going to play some different guys, some different combinations of players, and let's see who wants it. And you hate to look for the upcoming week, but really at that point we knew we weren't going to win the football game. At least realistically, we weren't going to win the football game. Let's just find ways to get better, just little teaching moments from that game that we can take to use those following 6 weeks.
Well, the Mustangs here in the second half were able to get back, get some offensive plays, and we start off with the highlights here in the second half. And our first one here kind of cut into it already. We have a pass, Kern to to Parks here for the Mustangs.
Yep, get a nice pocket, get some time to throw, sticks it in there on a curl route, and get some yards after the catch.
Now we continue on in the third quarter. Blake Gimbel in at quarterback and finds Cameron Paris here for a reception.
That's a big-time throw, throwing those side pocket throws between the safety and the corner. He sticks it in there, and he's a guy that loves to cut it loose.
Longest run of the day for Devontae Stevens, who had nearly 100 yards rushing.
Yeah, no, we've got Nathan Thompson pulling around at the center position, and actually does a nice job pulling around and creating a hole in a gap, and then he bounces it to the outside and doesn't step out of bounds. He cuts back inside to get some additional yards and sets us up for some success here on the next play.
Yeah, Stevens' first touchdown at Southwest, 6-yard run.
Yeah, similar type of play. We just went the other way with it, and does a nice job cutting back to the inside because the outside wasn't there, and then ends up bouncing it to the outside.
Here's a 22-yard pass completion, Gimbel to Kevin Parks.
Yeah, you can see here, Gimbel does a nice job just standing tall in the pocket, finding his receiver, delivers a strike. That's one thing that he does is he has some confidence to him, and he's not afraid to throw some balls into some tight windows.
On the defensive side, Daryl Thomas and Lance Boozer with a tackle for loss here.
Yeah, really both those guys, Thomas and Boozer, have been getting more and more playing time and just getting better each and every week.
Here is the pick six for Daryl Thomas, his first interception as a Mustang. He returns it for a touchdown.
You can see the ball's overthrown here, and he's playing in behind it. And the nice thing he does is he catches it first. I mean, that's sometimes the hardest thing to do is you're thinking about scoring. Well, I'd much rather just, all right, let's catch it. All right, good, we've got it. Now we can get a burst, and he uses his ability to get around the edge.
And back on the offensive side, a run by Stevens. Again, he rushed for 91 yards.
Yep, does a nice job here with just eluding the first tackler, and then ends up getting some decent yardage in behind it.
And our last highlight here, McCoy Rodning at linebacker, tackle for loss for the Mustangs on this play, stringing it out.
Yep, we end up getting it bottled up, and he ends up finishing the play and wrapping up, and that's what you got to do on these teams that like to run the footballs. Get guys near the football and, make sure you get the tackle once you get there. But as you can see, not many highlights. I mean, there really wasn't. And really, as I mentioned before, that first quarter, we wanted to eat as much clock. I mean, that's not our style. That's not our style of play on offense. We typically want to go fast, and we knew we didn't want to get into a shootout with Mankato. It just didn't make sense. So that we executed that extremely well. I think the first and fourth quarter we did a pretty decent job. It's just in between too much firepower up front, on their end. They dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides, and that makes it for a tough afternoon.
Well, the Mustangs now 1-4 on the season, return home, as we mentioned, for homecoming this Saturday night against Upper Iowa, 6 o'clock kickoff at the Schwann Regional Event Center. And Coach, you mentioned we've got a tough team coming in. They're a perfect 5-0, but you just look at the last couple of weeks we played at Minnesota Duluth, at Minnesota State, and not many teams, if any, have had that schedule against two of the top teams by far in this conference right now. Traditionally, obviously, the Duluth and Mankato, and we've had to go on the road, and we've taken our lumps. But I tell you what, there's still, as we mentioned, 6 games left. Only 1 game in the conference or in the division so far has been played. So again, we just embrace this challenge, and it should be just a fun night at the stadium.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, out of the last 3 weeks, we played a number 3 team and a number 4 team, and you're not going to win too many of those games. You pretty much have to have a perfect storm to beat those teams. But you know what? We do have a lot to play for and a lot of games to be played. It is homecoming. It is Upper Iowa week, where every single game comes down to the wire, as you well know. And so Coach Frana, former coach there, it means a lot to him. It means a lot to our players. It's going to be a fun environment, and it's going to be one of those shootout games again. They're going to try to run a lot of plays. We'll probably try to run a lot of plays, see who makes the most plays over the course of the evening, and that's the team that's going to win. And sometimes it's going to be the last possession, and that's what it's been down to many years now.
Yeah, the Mustangs lead the series with Upper Iowa 8-2. They've won 6 straight, but as we mentioned, just incredible games that these two teams have played. The last 4 games have been decided. The Mustangs have won all 4 by 3.5 points, including one that was in overtime. Of course, 7 of the last 8 games have been decided by 4.5 points, so it promises to be a great game on Saturday night against 2 very good squads. And also, Coach, a challenge for the defensive side to look at things. The number 2 rusher in the country, Chris Smith, who right now is number 1 in the country in rushing touchdowns, probably going to be clearly a Harlan Hill region finalist, if not a national finalist, and that's a challenge that the guys have to embrace again this week to take on one of the best players in the conference, and if not the country, and come to our stadium and try to prove a point.
Well, yes, I mean Upper Iowa is very similar to what we were last year when it comes to their players. I think they've got 10 out of their 11 starters seniors, and they've got a great group of performers. I mean, their quarterback's been playing for 4 years straight now. I mean,
at least.
Really,
it seems longer
all
than
those
that.
guys have been just playing forever. Hefty, tight end, 6'4", 240-pound. He's like a big receiver out there that can make all the plays. So it's going to be a tough challenge to try to get him off the field. But for whatever reason, we've had a lot of those close games. But Chris Smith is a special back. He's got great vision. He's running with speed and authority, and he's had a lot of long runs this year as well. You look at all of his touchdowns, you think, well, you're on the 2-yard line running one in. Well, he's had a lot of the longer yard runs, and that's what makes him special. Is you think we've got him handled, and all of a sudden he squirts through and busts out a 50-yarder. And so we've got to be aware of the passing game, the run game. Quarterback can throw it around. He never gets sacked. There's a lot of things that we've got to take care of from that standpoint. And so let's bring it on. Let's see what we can do against them. We've got to create some turnovers. That's going to be the big thing of this game. Can we get something to happen on our end? There's been a lot of things that have been positive that have helped them win some of those games. They've been able to get turnovers. They had 6 interceptions this last game, and anytime you have that many interceptions, you're going to be in pretty good position to win. And so they've had some things go their way. So it should be a great game to watch. That's for sure.
It should be. Again, Upper Iowa undefeated, 5-0. Again, they've had some big fourth-quarter comebacks. Their first game of the season, they scored 30 points in the fourth quarter to rally past Minnesota State Moorhead. Same against Bemidji State, and a game they trailed in the fourth. And same against Augustana this past weekend. They scored the final 15 points, and as we mentioned, had 6 interceptions, and as they win 31-25. So it should be a great night for college football at the Schwann Regional Event Center. Homecoming 2014 as the Mustangs take on Upper Iowa, 6 o'clock at the Schwann Regional Event Center. For the head coach, Cory Sauter, I'm Kelly Loft. Thank you for watching this week's episode of the Cory Sauter Show here at Studio One and at SMSUmustangs.com. Until next time, go Mustangs!